Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Stories with Pastor Macy. Today we're going to read another Mrs. Rosey-Posey book. This one is called Mrs. Rosey-Posey and the Chocolate Cherry Treat. So we're going to read it and then we're going to do something with some cherries and chocolate. All right. That's why we're in the kitchen today. So welcome to the kitchen. The verse that goes with this story is 2 Timothy 2:21. If you stay away from sin, you will be like one of these dishes made of purest gold, the very best in the house, so that Christ himself can use you for his highest purposes. And remember, we're in Poppyville, which is the place where Mrs. Rosey-Posey lives. Right in the middle of Poppyville, at the end of Marigold Lane, stands a big yellow house. All the children in Poppyville love this house. They love to play in the attic. They love to roller skate on the porch. They love to feed the ducks in the pond. But what the children love most about this house is Mrs. Rosey-Posey. She has 1,000 secrets. When she gets a twinkle, sparkle, zing look in her eyes, she's about to give away one of those secrets. One sunny Saturday, Mrs. Rosey-Posey saw Natalie sitting on her porch swing. "Mercy me!" cried Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "Such a frown! Whatever is the matter, Natalie Olivia?" Mrs. Rosey-Posey always calls the children by their first two names. Not the way your mother does when she's upset with you, but like she's calling you Prince or Princess. "It's not fair," Natalie told Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "All my friends went to the movies without me." "Why?" asked Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "My mom and dad said I couldn't go. They said it was not the kind of movie I should see." "And your friends went anyway?" Mrs. Rosey-Posey asked. "Yes," said Natalie. "My parents were the only parents who said no." "Mercy me," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey, shaking her head. "You're right. That's not fair to your friends at all." "What?" Natalie cried. "What do you mean not fair to my friends? I think it's not fair to me." Natalie looked at Mrs. Rosey-Posey. She had that twinkle, sparkle, zing look in her eyes. "Natalie Olivia," she said, "did you know that you have been set apart? Your parents are hoping you make the right choice." "Set apart," Natalie said. "What does that mean?" "Come with me," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. She took Natalie by the hand. "Natalie Olivia," she said, "you are about to learn the secret of the fine china plate." And off they marched together to the kitchen. "This morning I picked cherries," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "Then I dipped some of them in chocolate. Would you like some?" "Oh, yes," said Natalie. Cherries and chocolate are a good combo. Mrs. Rosey-Posey pulled a dirty paper plate out of the trash. "Would you like me to put your cherries on this plate?" Mrs. Rosey-Posey said with a smile. "Well," said Natalie, "if that's the only plate you have." "Oh, goodness, no," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "I have other plates, clean plates, special plates, plates which I have set apart." They went into the dining room. Natalie sat down. Mrs. Rosey-Posey put 3 plates in front of her. First, the dirty paper plate. Then, a plain brown dinner plate. My dinner plates are clear, not brown. And then a beautiful fine china plate with gold trim. "Which plate would you like to use for your cherries?" Mrs. Rosey-Posey asked. "This one," said Natalie. She pointed to the fine china plate. Mrs. Rosey-Posey scooped the cherries onto it. "Why did you pick this one?" she asked. Well, the paper plate was dirty, Natalie explained. The dinner plate was boring, but this one is beautiful. Indeed, said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. She sat down next to Natalie. Now I shall tell you the story of the fine china plate. Natalie popped a cherry in her mouth. She nodded and listened with her heart. Once there was a dinner plate. She was young and free, and with all her heart, she wanted to be special. She wanted to serve the king. One day, her friends called to her, "Come with us. We're going to go get smeared with beans and hot dogs." The dinner plate, she wanted to go, but she thought if I were a fine china plate, I would never get smeared with beans and hot dogs. "I can't go," she said. "I want to keep clean. The king might want to use me someday." Her friends laughed. "Little Miss Set Apart thinks she's too good for us," and they went on their way without her. The dinner plate felt sad. Being apart is lonely sometimes. Then one day, the king came. He looked for a clean plate that he could use. All the plates lined up. "Pick me, they cried. The dinner plate looked at her friend, and they were no longer dinner plates. They had turned into paper plates. Dark bean stains covered their sagging edges. Suddenly, the king reached for the lonely dinner plate. He smiled. "I am glad you waited for me," he said. "I'm glad you stayed clean. You made the right choice. Now I will turn you into a fine china plate, and I will use you to serve others." Mrs. Rosey-Posey leaned forward. "Do you know what all the paper plates said?" "No, what?" Natalie asked. "They shouted, 'It's not fair! Pick us! Turn us into china plates too!'" Natalie laughed. They had a choice. They didn't have to get covered with beans and hot dogs. They could have said no. The dinner plate did. "Mercy me," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "Perhaps they needed someone to help them make the right choice." "You mean the way my parents helped me today? They wanted me to stay clean, so they said no to the movie." "Indeed," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. It was quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Rosey-Posey whispered, "Natalie Olivia, what kind of plate do you want to be?" Natalie looked into Mrs. Rosey-Posey's dancing eyes. She saw a silver tear. Natalie sat up. She spoke in a clear voice. "I would like to be a fine china plate, the kind of plate the king can use to serve others." Then Mrs. Rosey-Posey did something strange. She sang to Natalie. Her voice was thick and sweet like a caramel apple, and this is what she sang: "Set apart just like a fine china plate, clean and ready to serve the king. Purest gold with a heart that's true to him, set apart, the choice is up to you." Then Mrs. Rosey-Posey took a pen out of her pocket. She picked it up and wrote on the back of it. "This is for you," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "Treasure it always," and she handed the fine china plate to Natalie. Natalie looked on the back of the plate. It said, "For Natalie Olivia, love always, Mrs. Rosey-Posey, 2 Timothy 2:21. "What does 2 Timothy 2:21 say?" Natalie asked. "It says, if you stay away from sin, you will be like one of these dishes made of purest gold, the very best in the house, so that Christ himself can use you for his highest purposes." "Wow," Natalie said. "You mean the secret of the fine china plate is found in the Bible?" "Of course," Mrs. Rosey-Posey said. "That's where all my secrets come from." Natalie hugged Mrs. Rosey-Posey. "You make me feel special. How can I ever thank you?" "Natalie Olivia," said Mrs. Rosey-Posey, "you are special. You are set apart just like a fine china plate. Stay clean, my dear one, and I promise you, one day the king will use you." I love this story of Mrs. Rosey-Posey. It's one I grew up read as I was learning how to read. And there are a couple things I love about it. I love that it says Natalie listened with her heart. Sometimes we can listen with our ears, but we're not listening with our heart. And I love that. And I also love that in the story of the plates, the fine china plate and the dinner plate and the paper plates, that the plate doesn't just get made into a fine china plate so that it can be more beautiful than the rest. It gets made into a fine china plate so that the king, so that Jesus, can use it to serve others. And that's what we're supposed to do as Christians. We don't just want to be better than the people around us. That's stupid. We want to be used by Jesus to help other people, to serve other people. So the very last page in our book has a recipe for Mrs. Rosey-Posey's chocolate-covered cherry treat. So we are going to make some chocolate-covered cherries today. So let me just tip this down. You still can't see my table, can you? Oh, there we go. That's not what we wanted to do. All right. You can kind of see it. I'm using a can of Vegemite to hold up my iPad. Here we go. So I have on the stove over here some chocolate. So what I did was I just put some water in the bottom of my pan, and then I put my chocolate in a bowl. Oh, there's some steam. And I melted my chocolate like that. You can also do it in the microwave. So you want some chocolate chips, about half a cup of chocolate chips. And you want some vegetable shortening, about a tablespoon, maybe a little less for that half a cup. And you can put those in the microwave together. Microwave it for 30 seconds, stir, 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 30 more seconds, stir, stir, stir. It'll probably take about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to melt that chocolate, depending on your microwave. I'm already wearing my apron. Chocolate can get all over everything, so make sure you're wearing an apron. And then I have a bowl of cherries here, but I've picked out and washed some that have stems because we want our chocolate-covered cherries to have their stems. So all I need is a plate to put my chocolate-covered cherries on. So I am going to use my little dinner plate and my fine china plate. And I have some circles of wax paper cut out that I'm going to put on those plates just to keep my cherries from completely sticking to them. It's easier to peel those cherries off of the wax paper. So I also have some sprinkles. These are my little cupcake holders, and they have sprinkles in them because I thought that could be kind of fun too. So let's see if we can make room for all of this on our table. And here we go. So we're just going to take our cherry, hold it by the stem, and dip it in the chocolate. And then I am going to take some of my sprinkles here, and I'm going to dip it in the sprinkles. And then I'm going to, my little circle of wax paper doesn't want to lay down. There we go. Then I'm going to put it on the wax paper. And you don't want to eat these right away. You want to put them in the fridge. Let's use a different kind of sprinkles for this one. You want to put them in the fridge so that they can cool and so that that chocolate hardens up. So I like these sprinkles. These sprinkles are big stars, so I'm just going to put a couple on my cherry. Here we go. All right. So you'll just keep doing that till you run out of chocolate or you run out of cherries, and then you'll put that in the fridge. Now here are some that I made last night. So you can see I used some sprinkles on some of them. The stem came off of this one while I was dipping it. And I hope that you enjoy some chocolate-covered cherries and that you remember that the reason we are special is so that we can serve others. I hope you have enjoyed Story Time with Pastor Macy and hearing another story about Mrs. Rosey-Posey. I'll see you soon. Have a great day.